He said that starting close to the time in Mincha, you're not allowed to eat a meal, or you're not allowed to eat Erev Pesach, which is eating during Pesach, afternoon during Pesach, you're not allowed to eat close to the time in Mincha. Now, what exactly is the time in Mincha? That's what it is. Okay, so when does this start? When does this time start? 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. What's the reason? What do you say? When time
Really, they ended up not doing the afternoon sacrifice earlier than really like 12:30 on an average clock, which means a half an hour after midday. Why did they wait a half an hour after midday? Why did they wait a half an hour after midday, etc.? Did we get our audio back on? Is our audio on now?
Yeah, but you sounded like a demonic robot.
I sound like a demonic robot.
For the first.
Now I stopped.
Because it's like it was some kind of weird interference thing.
Weird interference.
I'm sorry. I don't want to
okay, good. Hopefully people could hear us now and they'll stick with the program. Wow. As I was saying, officially Mincha is from noon until the night. That's officially. Mincha, really, in the temple, they used to wait a half an hour. Why did they wait a half an hour? Because it would take a half an hour for the shadow to start leaning, really, it would start leaning east, right? Meaning because the sun comes up in the east and then sets in the west. So for the first half of the day, the shadow is in the west. If you have a wall, the shadow is going to, if you have let's say a straight wall, the shadow is going to be in the west because the sun is in the east shining like this, and therefore you have the shadow in the west. When you hit noon, there would be no shadow. If you have a straight wall, there would be zero shadow because the sun would pretty much beam straight down. There would be no shadow. Then, as it moves towards the west, it will start shadowing to the east. Because the shadow for what? Because they wanted to make it clear that midday passed. So therefore, they waited till the shadow hit, till you see the shadow in the west. Now you'd ask me, why does it take a half an hour for the sun's shadow to go from the east to the west? The answer is because the temple walls, like if anybody knows architecture, was a little bit slanted in, right? It wasn't straight. Oh. It was just a drop slanted in. Why? Because that's if you make a very high, completely straight wall, especially in the olden days, it wouldn't be that sturdy. Whereas if you slant it in just a little bit, it would hold together much better. Especially many of the walls in the olden times, when they built them, they didn't even have any cement. They were just, stones on top of stones, very heavy stones on top of very heavy stones, and therefore if you actually look by the kotel, today, you can see there's just a little bit of an insert in each stone. Not a lot. You have to really. I personally never noticed it until I was at the kotel with an architect. And this architect, because he's an architect, he has a keen eye, and he was like, "Whoa, do you notice that?" And I'm like, "Well, now you say so, I noticed it."
Notice what?
Why wasn't I with an architect? I shouldn't be with an architect. I should stay away from him. Why me? I happened to be speaking to a guy at the hotel. He was an architect, and he's like, "Do you know this?" And I'm like, "Well, now that you tell me, I notice it."
I'm not sure.
If you look at the kotel, you will notice that
it's set back a little bit as it goes up.
Each stone is a little bit set back from the lower stone.
Okay.
As it goes higher, not a lot. We're talking about maybe a centimeter or two, and you're talking about massive stones this big, right? So it's hard to see that it's just a drop in. Now, you might even look at it and not notice it until you look at a few rows, and you can see that it's consistently going just a little bit in. So now, since the walls were a little bit slanted in, it would take about a half an hour until the shadow would go past the wall because that's just the way it works.
So, and because the sides of the temple were what?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was lined up to north and south, east and west, right?
There were walls that were aligned perfectly perfectly east, west, north, south. Even, by the way, even today, if you go to the kotel in the morning and you watch the shadow literally is like aligned perfectly with the kotel. Even today, how they did it in those days, I have no idea. But if you go to the kotel today, go just before noon, and you're going to see the shadow that's coming. The shadow that's in the west will slowly come closer and closer and closer to the wall as the sun comes closer and closer to noon, and then it'll kind of like go into the wall.
After Chatzot, the shadow switches to the other side.
Correct, but so that's as Chatzot is approaching, you will actually watch the shadow come closer and closer to the western wall, and you're going to see the line is like a perfect line.
Wow.
It's a perfect line.
So it's like a sundial. The Beis HaMikdash was a big sundial in a certain sense.
The Beis HaMikdash, and not only the Beis HaMikdash, today the Western Wall and a lot of the other walls are actually, the walls of Temple Mount, not even the walls of the temple. Meaning the whole Temple Mount plus the temple, etc., could have been a sundial because it was so perfectly aligned with the east, west, north, south. Yeah, these people had that brilliance back then. How they did it, I don't know. All right, good. Anyways, back to what we're saying is that mincha is technically from noon, from noon from chatzos, which is noon, but midday until the evening, till the sun goes down. That is when the afternoon sacrifice could be brought. However, in the temple, they would not bring the afternoon sacrifice till a half an hour after midday, so that you can clearly see the shadow going to the other side. Okay. Now, from the time which is about a half an hour after midday, that is when it's called Mincha Gedoyla, right? Mincha Gedoyla, the big Mincha. Why did they choose the big Mincha, the small Mincha? Other places you can discuss it. If I remember offhand, it says that at least most people would daven Mincha closer to Chatzos, and that's why it's called Mincha Gedoyla, because that's when many people did the Mincha. Now, there is another time, which is 2.5 hours later, called Mincha Ketana. Mincha Ketana means the small Mincha. The small Mincha is actually when they used to generally do the afternoon sacrifice in the temple, when they used to do it. Now, they could have done it from a half an hour afternoon, but they didn't do it a half an hour afternoon. They only did it usually 2.5 hours later, or perhaps more. There's actually Gemaras and Talmuds and Mishnahs. Don't put your head on my table. I don't like it. Besides for the fact that it's going to help you fall asleep and etc. No slipping. Stop sleeping. Anyways, what are we saying? So in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, even though they didn't they could have brought the mincha half an hour after Chatzos, they usually didn't. They usually waited 2.5 hours after the noon started in order to bring the afternoon sacrifice. Why do you think they did this? Anybody knows? Do you know? Why did they wait to bring the afternoon sacrifice? Why don't they bring it as early as they can? As a matter of fact, there's a general concept in Judaism is if you have a mitzvah, if you have a God's commandments, do it as soon as you can, because otherwise it sounds like you're procrastinating. Stop procrastinating, man.
Different sacrifices that require different times.
At
different times.
Yeah, but correct. But the afternoon sacrifice is commanded from a half an hour after Chatzot. Well, technically it's commanded at Chatzot. But we can say, okay, we're waiting a half an hour just so we can make sure that the shadow went to the east side. Okay, fine. But then we should do it right away. Why don't we do it right away? What? What do you mean? People couldn't get there on time? Everybody else is procrastinating? What's wrong?
Coffee break.
Coffee break. What's going on? Why did they push off the afternoon sacrifice? Anybody have any suggestions? No, and maybe from some people online.
From the morning sacrifice.
So basically, they didn't have enough manpower. Not a good thing. No, God forbid. The temple, they had as much manpower as necessary. There was no. They never held back, right? The temples, at least in most of the time, it was a very busy, successful, wealthy place. Yep. Anyone? The answer is that once you brought the afternoon sacrifice, you could no longer bring any other sacrifices in the temple. Now, in the temple, there were regular sacrifices. There were sacrifices that were obligatory. Every single day, you had to bring certain sacrifices. And then there were sacrifices that people could bring. As a matter of fact, anybody can bring a sacrifice for any reason whatsoever. They're not all the types of sacrifices, but there were certain types of sacrifices that anybody could bring whenever they want. Right? Now, the second they brought the afternoon sacrifice, it was like a closing call for the temple. They could no one could bring any more sacrifices. Right? And therefore, they pushed it off as much as they could in order to enable people to bring sacrifices. Right? So that's why they used to do it a little later. Now, that's why we have what's called Mincha Gedoyla and Mincha Ketana. Mincha Gedoyla is based on the earliest time that they were possibly allowed to bring a sacrifice in the temple. Mincha Ketana was when they usually actually brought the sacrifice in the temple on a regular day. Right? Now, both of these times are called Mincha. Okay? So, if I ask you what time is Mincha, the question is, which Mincha are you talking about? Right? Avi, you learned something new today. Can I know it? Like every day. Why else would you come to yeshiva? Not to learn something new? Good. So the Mishnah tells us that we learned before is that you on the day before Pesach Eve, you must stop eating at Mincha or close to the time of Mincha. The question is, what is Mincha? And that's what the Gemara is going to ask. Samuch lemincha, close to Mincha. The Gemara asks, it asks an inquiry. right? If you remember, if you see over there, iboilahu is a massive keyword. We had this before. Bo'iminei iboilahu, that Beis Ayin, the Beis Ayin question mark is all similar. Depends. Iboilahu is there is a inquiry, which means we're not telling you who made this inquiry, but there is in fact an inquiry. Iboilahu. However, it's not necessarily challenging or part of a previous discussion. In this case, obviously, because we're starting with a colon, but you could find iboilahu in the middle of a Gemara without a colon, but it's always starting a new discussion, right? If it's not with a colon, it might be on the same topic as before, but it's a new discussion. Iboilahu is always a new discussion, which is an inquiry. Very often, it's based on something that was taught. In this case, it's based on what was taught in the Mishnah. Based on the taught in the Mishnah close to Mincha, we say iboilahu. We have an inquiry. It was taught close to Mincha Gedola, or Dilmar, perhaps Mincha Ketana. Maybe it was Mincha Ketana. Now we have a problem. The Gemara is not sure which Mincha are we talking about. Are we talking about the big Mincha or the small Mincha? Right? We told you should stop eating close to Mincha. Right? Which Mincha? Yeah. Now our Gemara is going to try to analyze and make an analysis from all of its knowledge to try to figure out when the Mishnah says close to Mincha, is it talking close to the big Mincha or close to the small Mincha? Which one?
I'm going to just give my guess now. I'm going to say
Why?
Why? You give people more time.
You're like, give him more time. Why not? Just
why not?
how is that Talmudically relevant? It's not. We don't make decisions just on our feelings or to be nice to people. We need to actually make a decision based on what's true and what's the fact. They said mincha. Why are you saying mincha ketana? To give people more time? How is that relevant? How is that a relevant argument to Gemara? I'm asking. I don't know. Maybe it is.
I'm just kidding.
On the contrary, maybe we should say let's do it the earlier time because so that people should. Yeah. So you have reasons for both reasons. Yeah, but again, this is the American shtus. I hear the American shtus coming out of your head. Is that one guy? He wants to argue with another guy. He says that they want you to think this, but this is the real truth. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the other one's the real truth, and he wants you to think that that's not the real. Yeah. We actually met. I met one time in Crown Heights. I met these black Hebrews. I was a kid, and these black Hebrews. You ever heard of the black Hebrews? No, I don't know. He might be black and Jewish, but I don't think he was a black Hebrew. Black Hebrew is a particular movement in America that is a very interesting group of people that they believe that they're Jewish. Why? Because they're black. They believe the definition of Jewish is black, and that's it. If you're black, you're Jewish. And if you're not black, you're not Jewish. That's what they believe. I don't know how they got that. They actually they would come and they would try to argue us. We were teenagers, and one of they put it this way. They made an argument that Moshe was black. So I argued back to them. I said, okay, so it could be. Let's just say for argument's sake, the original Jews were black. Let's say that. But are you telling me that all the blacks were Jews? And he couldn't have an answer. They can't answer my question. What do you think? That every single African in the world was Jewish? No. Africa was full of African blacks. It could be, and again, I'm not arguing that this is true, but it could be that the original Jews living in Israel were black. But that doesn't mean that all the blacks were Jews. Doesn't mean that, but somehow they took it. Their proof that all blacks were Jews was that the Jews were black. That does not prove that all blacks are Jews, right? Anyways, so I'll tell you something. One of the black Hebrews once told me when they was arguing with me. He says, even your parents know. Your parents know for a fact that you're the fake Jews, right? They know it for a fact, and they're lying to you, right? And so then one of the kids' parents actually was walking by. And he says, well, there's my father. Why don't you ask him? And the black people was like, yeah, right. They call him over. He says, you're right. You know that you're the fake Jews, right? The guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, you lying. It's like, they built the whole structure, It's they're always trying to say that the other guy's lying and therefore you should believe I'm saying it's true. Let me tell you something. If somebody tells you somebody else is lying, you know what you know for a fact? Someone's lying. Mm-hmm. Then you know for a fact. If he tells you that somebody's lying, then somebody is lying, right? The question is, who is it? Is it the guy he's telling you, or is he himself, right? So then you have a 50-50. Maybe it's him. Maybe the guy that's talking to you is lying, and maybe the guy he's talking about is lying, right? That's it. Because if a guy just tells you information, then you don't know there's a liar. No, there's information. Okay, so let me see.
What if the guy who says that the guy's lying is truly convinced that he's lying?
Again, if somebody says that somebody else is lying, that doesn't mean that the person saying that's lying. But it means that you can determine for a fact that there's a liar here. There's definitely a liar. There's definitely a liar. If I say that somebody else is a liar, there's definitely a liar.
No, because
the question is it me or is it him?
Well, no, because it could be
but there's definitely a liar around.
No, it could be the guy that's saying that the guy is lying is confused, and the guy who's accusing of lying is in fact not lying.
But in which case the guy that's confused is lying, even though he's maybe he's indeliberately lying. He's not deliberately lying, but he's lying. Because if he's confused and he says the other guy's lying and the other guy's not lying, then he's lying.
What is it? Abaye, Omar, Abaye. No.
Good. Why not? Good. Where are we? All right. So the point is, Mendel, what I want to teach you today is that when you're talking a Talmudically relevant conversation, you have when you have two options, you have to bring evidence that one's better than the other. You can't just decide. You can't. It's not a flip the coin. But that's exactly what I'm trying to teach you. You don't make a guessing game, right? I know. Yeah, I'm saying in the Talmud you can't. It's not guessing. You have to. Is there evidence to one or the other? Is there evidence one way or is there evidence the other way? What's that? Yeah, but switching your answer is just as bad as the first answer. Your answer should be that I have no evidence to say one way or the other. That's what you should say right now. Again, the reason I'm telling you this is that when you're learning the Talmud, right, you shouldn't. Some people do what you do. Some people do what you do. They try to guess, and then they see who's right and who's wrong. No. To begin with, don't guess. You need to have ground. Now, if you have grounds to make a guess, if you think I think that this is evidence, then you can make an argument based on the evidence. And then if it turns out that your evidence is incorrect, then fine. But then, or let's just say the Gemara ignores your evidence. Now you need to figure out how your evidence is in fact incorrect. But for you to just guess based on no evidence, or say I feel, I'm going to come up with a theory, it's actually going to prevent you from properly learning the Talmud the proper way, because you must do this based on evidence and some type of Talmudically relevant argument, right? Again, I'm not just picking on you just to pick on you. I'm picking on you because I want to train your brain to work in a Talmudic fashion. All right? Good. So that's that. So now the Gemara is going to analyze the two options. What's the matter? This guy wants to make aliyah. Avi Aki wants to make aliyah. So what are you waiting for? You could make aliyah, and you could come visit us in Tzfas, learn in our yeshiva. You could get a hold of us. We'll help you with visas. Even I'm assuming if you're Jewish. At this yeshiva, we only accept people who are Jewish. If you're not Jewish, you could become Jewish, but that that's a different yeshiva. There's a different yeshiva to do that. But if you want to come make aliyah, you get a hold of us. We'll help you out. We'll maybe bring you in yeshiva. You can make aliyah here. Some guys did that, right? They come here to yeshiva and they make aliyah here. We get them like a visa, student visa, and then once they get a student visa over here, then they make aliyah.
No, but they don't make aliyah here.
Huh?
We attempt to make aliyah here, but bureaucracy doesn't.
No, there's always going to be bureaucracy. Whether you make aliyah from outside of Israel, we have quite a few successful aliyah makers over here. Yeah, we did. Good. And by the way, some guys come to the yeshiva for a year or two, and then they leave and they go back to America or wherever they're from. So, okay. Anyways, we ask, is it mincha gedayla tanan or mincha ktana tanan? Now the Gemara is going to evaluate the two possibilities. It is talking about close to mincha gedayla tanan umishum Pesach, and the reason for stopping to eat is because of the Pesach offering. In other words, maybe if you start eating, you are going to eat for too long, like many people unfortunately do, and then they're going to forget to make the Pesach sacrifice. Again, the Gemara is analyzing why would there be a prohibition to eat after Mincha. Now, if you're going to tell me the prohibition is starting from Mincha Kedola, the only thing that I would think would be the reason is because you might delay doing the Pesach. And as I told you that in the temple in Jerusalem, they used to do the afternoon sacrifice, Mincha Ketana, 2.5 hours after time, in order to enable people to bring sacrifices. There was one day a year that they did the afternoon sacrifice as early as possible, and that was Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach. Why? Because there's one sacrifice that actually was brought after the afternoon sacrifice, and that was the Pesach sacrifice, once a year. The rest of the year, the last sacrifice of the day was the afternoon sacrifice, and then the temple would pretty much close down, close for business. No more sacrifices after the afternoon sacrifice. However, on Pesach, it was the exact opposite. The Pesach sacrifice was meant to be brought after the afternoon sacrifice, and therefore they used to try to do it early because there would be a lot of people to do the Pesach sacrifices, so they would do it as early as possible because they could start doing the Pesach sacrifice. Right? Now, what would be the only possible reason to stop eating for the rabbis? Again, this is a rabbinical rule. Why would the rabbis tell somebody to stop eating from Mincha Ketana, which would be noon plus a half an hour? That the only reason would be because then they might neglect to do the Pesach. That would be the reason. So, by the way, Gemara very often does this. We do kind of a backwards analysis. First, we analyze what would be the possible reasons for those two, and then we will analyze based on those two reasons. We will try to analyze which one is correct.
Also, isn't there like a problem with chametz? Like if you eat so close to the Pesach, you might like.
But what's if you're not eating chametz? What's if you don't eat chametz? Says who? What do you mean? What's if they're eating non egg matzah? We actually had this before in the Gemara. We have the egg matzah. Yeah. Well, if you got rid of all your chametz, then you're done. Like why? Huh? If you got rid of your chametz, you got rid of your chametz already 2 hours before noon. You got out, yeah. So put it this way. I like the fact your analysis right now, your question about chametz, is a good example of a good Talmudic argument. You say, what? Maybe it's because of chametz. So you have a good question on the Gemara. The Gemara says it has to be because of Pesach. You're saying, well, what about for chametz? Should I tell you how we know it's not for chametz? How? Because when do you have to stop eating chametz? When do you have to stop eating chametz? No, but at 10 o'clock, meaning 2 hours before noon, right? So why is it telling you to stop eating at noon if, according to you, it would have been 2 hours before noon? And therefore, because...
He's right to Raisa, but the rabbinical provision is 10 o'clock, right?
Right, but if the rabbis again, think about it. If the rabbis are telling you don't start a meal because you might accidentally eat chametz, they would tell you not to start eating a meal at the time that you're not supposed to eat chametz anymore. Right? In other words, they let you eat a meal from 2 hours before chatzos all the way up to chatzos, right? Even though you might be eating chametz, right? So that proves that the reason is not for that. That itself is a proof that that's not the reason for it. Yeah? What's that? Oh, so I'm saying you said, why isn't that the reason? Now we know why it's not the reason. Because if it was the reason, it would have been an earlier time. Right? So now that it's at that time, the Gemara is essentially analyzing, even though it's not telling you this, but it's essentially analyzing what could be the possible reasons of prohibiting eating starting from a half an hour after chatzos. The only possible reason could be because you might forget to do the Pesach offering, right? And there is no other possible reason. If you could come up with a reason, then you would have a good question on the Gemara. You tried to come up with a reason, and I explained to you that if that was the reason, it would have been a different time, right? You could. Go ahead. Go ahead. I trust I trust that any reason that you would come up with would be able to be debunked. And the reason for that, the reason I'm saying that is because, the reason I'm saying that is because the Gemara already tried. The people in the time of the Gemara, you're saying, I'm going to figure out a reason. Guess what? There was 20,000 rabbis in that generation of the Talmudic period, more, that were all trying to find reasons. And the only possible reason they found was the Pesach. Because if they found another reason, we would have mentioned it. The fact that they didn't mention it means that there was that all these rabbis, all these students couldn't. So you're like, you know what? All these students, I'll beat them. I'm going to beat them. I'm going to be smarter than all this tens of thousands of students. Can I know how to? We have some very confident students over here.
Mendel's a smart guy. He's a good.
Yeah. Maybe he's smarter than every Jew that ever existed in history, right? Could be.
Well, every Jew does have a unique thing that they can. What's it called? Huh?
Every Jew has a chilik in Torah.
Yeah. Every Jew has an area of Torah that says that they could bring some input into that. Yeah, if they try and they
which is pretty amazing because of all the fact of all of the sages and everything that's happened up to this point.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's continue. Okay, so we said if the reason would be mincha gedola, if the time would be mincha gedola, the only reason would be because you might forget about your Pesach's offering. Yeah. So let's read it inside. Tanan samach lemincha gedola tanan. It is close to the mincha gedola tanan Pesach, and it's because of the Pesach offering. Dilma asi lemimshich. Perhaps he will drag on his meal, the asi imnuye milenevad pischa, from doing the Pesach offering. Maybe that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Oy dilma, or perhaps maybe that's not the case. Maybe maybe it's really telling you about mincha ketana. And if it was telling you about mincha ketana or mushum matzah, the reason would be because of matzah. Dilma asi lemechla matzah achila gasa. Perhaps you will fresarain, you will eat a whole big amount of matzah during the day. Yeah? A big amount. Gasa is like a thick amount. Right? Now you're going to ask me, how do you eat matzah on Pesach afternoon, the afternoon prior to Pesach, when you're not allowed to eat matzah the whole day of Pesach? So we had a Tosfos previously that said that it's talking about matzah shira, which technically you could eat, which means matzah that is not pure matzah. Any matzah that you really shouldn't be using during the Seder, you could technically eat on Erev Pesach as well. It's called matzah ashira, which you really should not be using for the Seder, right? What are you making faces at me like that for? Huh? You should not use matzah ashira for a Seder. Ashira. Matzah ashira means matzah that has like eggs in it, etc. During the Seder, you're meant to eat very pure, straight matzah. There's two ingredients that go into matzah: water and flour. There. Yeah, if you go to a matzah bakery, they don't put anything else. It is pure. Two ingredients in the whole factory: flour and water. That's the only thing that's allowed. Nothing else. Yeah, good. So now let me explain to you. There is a biblical mitzvah to eat matzah on the eve of Pesach, right? In the evening of Pesach. It's a biblical commandment. Now, there are those that say that the biblical commandment of eating matzah means that you actually have to eat it. Now, what's true eating? True eating is when you actually need it. When your body physically needs sustenance, that's called eating. What happens if you stuff yourself and your belly's so full and you cannot even put a little bit of more into your belly and you feel super full, but then your Jewish grandmother comes in with all sorts of food and she'll be super offended if you don't eat, and you're like,
Still kind of eating.
and you stuff it down your throat, and then you stuff a little bit more down your throat, and you stuff a little bit more down your throat, right? That's actually according to halachic opinions, it's not considered the eating that God commanded you to eat. God commanded you to eat. The commandment to eat is to eat in a normal way. No, it's to eat in a normal way. Meaning, the normal way for a human to eat is when they actually feel that they need the sustenance. Right? Again, we're not talking about, it could be that you're eating a lot, you're eating a little, whatever it is. But if you're stuffing it down your throat, if you have zero natural instinctual desire to eat the food, you're just putting it down your throat because you meant to put it down your throat, right? It's not necessarily considered eating, and therefore the person is not properly fulfilling their mitzvah of eating matzah by stuffing it down their throat. Now, if you eat the afternoon before Pesach, if you happen to eat too much, comes to the evening, and your stomach will be full, and then you're going to stuff the matzah down yourself anyways because it's a mitzvah, but you didn't even fulfill the mitzvah. And therefore, for this reason, perhaps, again, we're analyzing, perhaps this is the reason they tell you cannot eat from mincha ketana, which is closer to the evening, and they're saying, listen, you got to stop eating at a certain point in order to have room for the matzah. Like many people, if they're going to a wedding or they're going to or your mom knows that you have to eat dinner, and then you're eating junk food. Your mom's like, stop eating junk food. You won't want to eat any of the dinner, right? You ever had that? Your mom ever did that to you? Stop eating because I need you to wait a little bit of time for you to be able to eat the actual food that I want you to eat. Mincha Ketana, I believe it's at 2.5 hours after noon. So let's say it's an equal day. So meaning the day starts at 6, ends at 6, and the midday is 12. So 12:30 would be Mincha Gedola, and 2:30 would be Mincha Ketana, and then there's Plaga Mincha, which is another concept which we haven't yet started. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. First of all, there was a few reasons for doing that. Number one is most people would bring their kabbanas. How long did they have? They used to bring the morning one at Nate's, right? So we're talking about what on a normal day it's 6 o'clock. So they had, let's say, from 6 to 12 is 6 hours, and then they would have another 2.5 hours. That's 8.5 hours. That's plenty of hours. Huh? 9.5 hours.
So we always said.
Yeah, okay, so it's 9.5 hours.
Rabbi, when do I have to stop eating? I can't eat before Mincha Gedola, so
Huh?
I have a meal before Mincha Gedola, so that's like 2.5, 3 hours.
Who says you can't have? Who said you can't have a meal? What?
I read it in the Halacha.
That what?
You can't eat a meal before Mincha Gedola. Either Mincha Gedola or Mincha Ketana.
What? What are you?
Mincha Ketana.
I don't know what you're talking
The
about.
halacha, Rabbi, the halacha of you can't if you don't have a set menu.
Oh, that's if you didn't daven mincha. That has to do with something else.
You didn't have Mincha yet.
Okay, so daven mincha and then eat. So what?
I'm saying, no, I just want to know when.
When are you not allowed to eat? I'm not sure. I don't want to go into halachas that are not relevant. As a matter of fact, there's a Gemara that says that you should not ask your teacher a halacha that's not relevant to the one he's discussing, because perhaps he won't know it accurately and he'll give you the answer anyways, or he will be embarrassed and feel bad that he doesn't have an answer for you. What could I tell you? But yes, I generally, when we're discussing this Talmudic topic, we only stick on topic over here. And by the way, anybody online, if you're listening to me now, you could also ask a question on topic, and your comments come up on my screen. And if they're relevant to our class, we will deal with them, right? Like we did with this guy who wanted to do Aliyah, although that wasn't really relevant. It was more relevant to the yeshiva, because I don't know, maybe this guy, Avi Aki, maybe he wants to come to yeshiva, right? We have an Avi here. Where did Avi go? Oh, he went to the bathroom. Anyways, say that we have an Avi something. I don't know what's your last name. I'm so bad. What's your last name? Oh, you need to wash first. Okay, good. You could speak, but say it. Let him. He wants to do it. Anyways, good. Okay. Now let's understand where our Gemara is going. What's that?
It's from the 9th hour of the day.
9.5.
From the 9th hour.
Yeah.
Until you daven.
Is what? That's the rule.
Yeah.
So it says from the 9th hour until you daven mincha, you're not allowed to eat. Okay. Right, but if once you eat, you can eat. Once you daven, you can eat. Yeah, 100%. Let's continue on. Yeah, are you okay with that? Good. Huh?
Technically, right now, it's around 2:33, 34 until.
Oh, that's why we daven mincha too, because otherwise, because we know the Bachram are always eating. So as soon as it's about to hit that time, we do the mincha service. Then so we know that our Bachram can continue eating. Otherwise, I have a problem, right?
Oh wait, no, maybe I could be wrong. This could I'm showing the one on Friday.
Huh?
I'm looking at the latest meal on Friday, so it could be wrong.
Ah.
I take my back.
So you might be wrong too.
It might be from midday until.
So again, well, why would you say let's get back to the Gemara? Good.
Earliest mincha is 12:23.
Earliest.
So it's probably from the earliest mincha until
Why? Why are you assuming that?
Because it wouldn't be before the earliest mincha.
It's definitely not before the earliest mincha, but maybe it's not to the mincha ketana. You have to look at halacha. Don't try to guess things. We like somebody did earlier in this class. You try to make guessing games. No guessing game here. You got to know where your sources are, etc. Anyways, now to recap. Listen carefully. We're going to recap a little bit for you. Okay? We're going to recap as follows. The Gemara right now is not sure whether the Mishnah is talking about mincha ketana or mincha gedola. The Mishnah tells us that on the afternoon prior to Pesach, you're not allowed to eat. We said it's possible that it meant prior to mincha ketana or prior to mincha gedola. We gave the possibilities that if hypothetically the rule was about mincha gedola, the only possible reason could be because of the sacrifice, Pesach sacrifice. Now, why would that be relevant? Because today we don't do the Pesach sacrifice, so it could be that maybe the rules will change. Could be. Again, we need to know what's the reason. So potentially the reason is because of the Pesach offering, right? Good. Or perhaps it was mincha ketana, and if it was mincha ketana, the only reason would be because if you eat from that time on, you may be full, and then when you come to the Seder and you try to eat the matzah for the Seder, you're going to be stuffing it down your throat, and if you're stuffing it down your throat, you're not fulfilling the obligation of eating matzah, because when you eat matzah, it has to be regular, normal, natural eating, and not stuffing it down your throat. You know what what's it called used to do? You know what the Romans used to do? What did the Romans do?
The vomitoriums.
Yeah. The Romans were so into their eating and enjoying their food. So they used to eat a big, massive meal. And then they used to go in a special bathroom that was specially made for this. They used to take their finger, they used to stuff it down their throat until they vomited. All the food came right out of their belly. And now they had a full belly. They would go sit down and eat again. Romans, yeah. Grobium, they were just about the physical loathliness, stuffing things down. Yeah, good. Good.
Say something about it's like at least the Milton Keynes, the tables would be so disgusting.
The what?
The tables.
Yeah.
Would be so disgusting. Would be like feces, throw up.
Why?
And everything on the table. Because
Why?
they were just so into eating that they didn't care.
Huh?
Yeah, I heard.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think you're hearing things, man. Never heard of such a thing.
No, they were just like.
Why? They probably kings had nice tables. What? Yeah.
Like the olden kings. Not the
Yeah. The olden kings, They want to make, in the modern world, they want to make as if we're so awesome and everybody else sucked. It's not necessarily true. There was high-class people back then. There were some people that did worse things. There were some people that did better things. Even the Romans, they used to barf. They had their own room for barfing. They had a special barf room,
I think they still do stuff like that at the Grammys, actually.
Yeah, what, they barf?
Well, the whole situation, I think.
They mamish barf. They still have
at some level of the.
They really try to barf to eat more food.
Well, no, but they're doing it like spiritually with their idol worship,
I never heard of anybody doing that today. Yeah, anyways. Huh? Do they do it on purpose?
Yeah, exactly.
Serious?
The Grammys.
Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you, I don't know if I should say this, but some of the most disgusting women I've ever seen in my life that I really like I'm appalled of, is these models. They literally, I find them super ugly. Like the real skinny ones, they look like a toothpick and like I don't know why, huh? Huh? I didn't see them for a while. My old days, maybe my teenage years. Anyways, Chatois Nurim. Right, but the point is that that I definitely find it extremely unattractive when a woman's so skinny that you can see that you could see it on her face. I'll tell you the truth. There's something about it depends. There's something about a human ability that if you kind of let go, you could kind of see a lot from a person's face. Like if a person went through a lot of trauma, very often it says it on their face. You see that on their face, you can see it. You could see the pain and suffering on their face, right? And I think that when you see some of these women, because they go through all this pain, trying to force themselves to throw up and starving themselves, it's a lot of pain for them. So I think that it brings it out on them. And although, they'll make very nice makeup and stuff like that, but you can see behind it, and you can see the suffering that they went through, and it's appalling. To me, it's like appalling. I don't know. Maybe I'm more sensitive than other people. Maybe I'm more sensitive than other people, but I find it appalling. I find it appalling. You see somebody's face and you see so much of their pain and suffering that they went through to try to make themselves look beautiful. And it just, to me, it's like extremely repulsive.
So tell them that's why you don't bow down to vanity and nothingness.
Yes, that's why you don't bow down
to vanity
and nothingness.
If you do, then that's what happens to you. You become like a toothpick with lip filler.
Yes, you should be serving God and not serving the lusts of other human beings. Okay, that's the message for me. Any models out there, stop serving the lusts of human beings and start serving God. Zeo. That's unfortunately that's the whole Western world today has become into this worship of human lust. Right, of food, and by the way, Romans was also about that. The Romans were very into worshiping human lusts
and violence.
Well, that was a lust as well. There is a human lust. No, there's a human lust for violence and blood. It gives you a rush. They call it a rush, right? You get this rush, and it feels good. It's like it didn't know it's a human lust. For violence is a human lust. What do you think? What do you think people go crazy over boxing matches and wrestling and MMA and all this stuff? There's a human lust that lusts for violence and destruction, and it gives like this rush and this right. That's why
like Logan Paul and I Show Speed and all that.
Yeah, the Romans used to. Today they got a little nicer, but in the olden days they used to have one of the sports. They would have a lion and they would attack a human being, and they would watch the lion fight the human being and see who wins. Usually the lion won in most cases. That's entertainment. For you, it's entertainment. For the guy involved, I don't know if it is. Right, the same thing with these models we're talking about. The people that are watching it, for some reason, they get their lust triggered. However, the poor woman suffered like anything just to give this guy a bit of lust, and she suffers like that. One of the things I hate, I don't know why I'm talking about this. One of the things that I hate is you go in New York City in midwinter when you're like wrapped in these coats. And you see this woman whose feet are bare, like all the way up to her, whatever, and I'm like, forget about it. I'm like, dude, it's freezing outside, man. Like, come on, what? You want to freeze so that some guy could feel good about looking at you? Like, come on, that's worship. That is ultimate worship of other people's lusts, right? It's horrible. It's disgusting. So, yeah.
How about men with haircuts?
Men with haircuts? What about that?
Isn't that the same thing?
Why is that the same thing?
You mean fancy haircuts? Or just any haircut? You got a haircut.
No. I'm saying like they have kufi hair, or something.
Whatever. I'm not getting into the details. Put it this way: if a guy, in general, in the Western world, there's definitely a lot of worship of other people's lusts or their own lusts, right? Lust. You worship for lust, right? Which is ultimately nothingness, because you lust for something and then you get it, and then it's over, done. And sometimes you don't even get it, and then you just lust for it your whole life, right? Yeah? Good. Stop worshiping lust. That's it. Done. Start worshiping God. God is the creator of the world. Creator of the world made this world to be a happy, healthy, peaceful, positive place. That's it. Zell. All right. Now we got derailed. Let's try to get re-railed. Okay. We now explained what the two possibilities are: mincha ketana, mincha gedola, and what is the reason for mincha ketana, and what is the reason for mincha gedola. Yeah. Now we're going to try to see if we can prove either of them right. Okay. And we're not going to go too far because our class is time is running towards an end. Okay. So he says as follows. Omar Ravina. Ravina says as follows. Toshma, come and listen. Come and listen. I'm going to bring a proof. Toshma, as we said in the past, is a quote from a Tanaic, is not necessarily from a Tanaic sage, but a quote from somewhere, which is going to try to resolve our issue here. Yeshua Ephraim, why you have to go to your room all the time? It's like the third time I see you walk over here. Sit and say there, sit and learn. Huh?
I think it's only
You don't want. Huh? Okay, you'll find out later. We're in the middle. Toshma, come and listen. It says as follows in a Tanaic quote: Afilu Agrippas HaMelech, even King Agrippas, Shehu Rogel Lecho B'Teisha Shois, that he normally eats in the 9th hour, Oisei Hayoim, that day, Lo Yoichel, he should not eat Ad Shetechshach until it gets dark. Right? Meaning, he normally eats his first meal, he eats breakfast at the 9th hour. He should not eat. That's it, he has to starve a whole day until it gets dark. Now that is the quote. Now the Gemara is going to analyze that quote to try to determine from that quote whether we're talking about mincha ketana or mincha gedola. Now the Gemara is going to say, "I amrat bishlama." Do I have that over there as a keyword? Very important keyword. Yeah, 20. I amrat bishlama. If you're going to say, it would make sense. If you're going to say as follows, it would make sense. Which means if you're going to say samach mincha ketana tnan. If you're going to say that we're talking about mincha ketana, it would make sense. Hainura busa de Agrippas. This is the chidush. This is the new idea being taught by Agrippas. However, if we're trying to tell you mincha gedola, mayra busa de Agrippas, chol Yisrael amekoro. Yeah. Now, Rashbam explains as follows. Mincha Gedola really is 9.5 hours. Agrippas, who really eats breakfast at 9, technically should be able to eat at 9 till 9:30. However, the Gemara is trying to tell, or this Tanaic sage is trying to say, that since he's starting his breakfast at 9, he will definitely finish after 9:30, and therefore he shouldn't even start eating at 9 because he's going to continue to eat after 9:30. And therefore, we mentioned Agrippas to teach you that somebody should not even start eating if they're going to finish eating after 9:30. However, if you're going to tell us that Mincha Gedola, which is 6.5 hours, which is 2 hours earlier, right? Then why is it? What is the point of bringing Agrippas? He is eating in the 9th hour. We were told to stop eating 6.5 hours, and since he's at 2.5 hours later, right? 6, 7, 8, yeah. Because if it was saying mincha gedola, he would obviously be prohibited. Obviously, he would be prohibited because he's eating after the time. There would be no point of bringing him as an example. The fact that we bring him as an example, we're saying even though you usually start at 9. On the day before Pesach, you should not start at 9 because you're not going to finish till 9:30, which means, in other words, you're not even allowed to eat after 9:30. And by the way, 9:30 really means 2:30 in the modern clock, because in those days they used to count from the beginning of the day. The beginning of the day was hour 1. Today we begin and end our times from the midnight, right? Midnight is 0, and then 1 is 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, etc. Right? And midday is 12. Midnight is 12, and midday is 12. However, what was I saying? In the Jewish way of counting, the first hour is really pretty much, again, if the day is equal, day starts at 6 and ends at 6, hour 6 would be 0, and hour 7 would really be 1, hour 8 would be 2, hour 9 would be 3, etc., etc., etc. So 9 o'clock would really be, 6 would be 12, 8, 7, 8, 9, which would be 3 o'clock. However, also, even though we say 3 hours, we really mean the beginning of the third hour, which is really be 2:01. Meaning 2 o'clock plus a little bit would be already in the third hour. Again, the first hour is from 0 to 1. The second hour is from 1 to 2. The third hour is from 2 to 3. Yeah, etc. Does this make sense? Good. Anyways, the point of the Gemara is saying that if the Mishnah was talking about Mincha Gedolah, there would be no point of bringing Agrippus because he's eating after the time. Why would he be an exception? Right? There's no reason for him to be an exception. However, if we're saying Mincha Gedolah, so we're telling him he should be careful not even to eat because he's going to pass Mincha Gedolah and he's not allowed to eat past Mincha Gedolah. Does that make sense? How about dollars?
Okay, can I have your refutation to this?
You're gonna make a refutation to the Gemara, you think?
No, attempted.
Okay, good. Attempted. Oh, I like
Don't
that.
we say that
Yeah.
you're able to start before time and then go past the time?
Who say?
Well, we mentioned in regards to Erev Shabbos that you're allowed to bring your meal all the way into Shabbos.
Depends
It
depends according to who, and this particular discussion is not yet discussing that. We don't know if that applies to it. Maybe that doesn't apply to Erev Pesach. Again, with Shabbos, it may apply. It may not apply. Sorry, that rule may apply to Shabbos, because on Shabbos, even though you're supposed to try to enjoy your Shabbos by eating, but it's not a biblical commandment. Here, it's a biblical commandment to enjoy yourself. It's not a biblical commandment to enjoy yourself through eating. Correct, but again, you can do it any time throughout Shabbos. Whereas on Pesach, you have to literally do it. You have to do it that night, meaning you have the night of Seder. You have to eat matzah. It's specifically in the night. The night going into Pesach is a mitzvah minaraisa to eat matzah. During the Seder, you actually make a blessing on the mitzvah of eating matzah. Yeah. Good. Anyways, that's to where we're going to go up to today. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we should try to finish the quota. How far did we get over here? Let's just see. We got up to 21. We got through 21. We got through number 21, and Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we'll finish the rest. If anybody has a question from the class, feel free to ask. If anybody has a question from online, feel free to ask. Again, it's got to be generally on the topic, not some random question. And yeah, good.
When they say matzah on Pesach, then why is there a big dispute against the favorite matzah people like round and square? Like, why is there a big machlokes?
Huh? I don't get, why shouldn't there be a machlokes? Why shouldn't there be a machlokes between round and square matzah? And by the way, who says there's a machlokes between round and square matzah? Let's start. You made a lot of assumptions over here. Let's go one. Let's start from the first one. You said there's a machlokes between round and square matzah. I never heard of such a machlokes.
Because there's some rabbanim that say you should only do round.
I never heard of such a thing. Never heard of any rabbi saying you should only eat round matzah. Never heard of such a thing. Sorry, never heard of it.
In the Chabad, they only.
I heard it's hidden.
No. Never heard of any rule that you're not allowed to eat square matzah.
It's not a rule. It's like a preference.
Never heard of such a preference to eat round matzah versus square matzah. Never heard of such a thing.
What I remember
Yeah.
is that the square ones you get are just not properly are not kosher. The round ones because
So again, now you're dealing with something else. Usually, machine matzahs are square and handmade matzahs are round. right? Because for machines, it's much easier to do things square than round, and for people, it's much easier to do things round than square. So that's why usually when people make handmade matzah, they're round, and when you make machine-made matzah, they're square, right? Now, there is people that say that the matzah should be done by hand because it needs to be made by a Jewish person with the intention of fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah. As a matter of fact, if you go into a matzah factory, you'll hear the people working always screaming English, Shei matzah's mitzvah, meaning it all the way. They make a proclamation proclaiming that this matzah is being made with the intention of being used for the mitzvah of matzah, right? Yeah? Good. Now, what?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Now, that some people say that machine matzah, because it's not being made by people, it's not the proper way to be done. Some people say there might be some issues that machines could always make mistakes, and machines could maybe have hidden parts that maybe store chametz in it over time, and therefore could be problematic. There are all sorts of different practical reasons why many rabbis say not to use machine matzah and rather to use handmade matzah. There's also a lot of machine matzah is not shmura matzah. It's matzah, but it's not shmura matzah.
What does shmur mean?
Shmura means that it was watched from the time that it was cut to make sure that water never touched the grain. Because if the water touched the grain and the grain was cracked, if the grain was whole, water touched the grain, no problem. But what happens if the grain was cracked and water touches it, then water could go into the crack of the grain and then make the grain chametz.
That way you can't eat matzah and drink, or at some point.
That's a Chabad thing, but yeah, so shmura matzah means that the grain was watched from the time it was cut out of the ground until it was made into matzah, right? That is an extra stringency that most observant Jews do today, but not everybody. That particular stringency, they do make there's machine-made shmura matzah too. I mean, it's not just there are machine-made shmura matzah, right?
That kind of.
And it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper, but yeah. Shmura means no. Shmura means watched. Means that it was meaning.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Meaning that they didn't just go and buy flour and then make it into matzah, which technically you could do. Like, why would I think that water touched the flour before? According to strict Torah law, you could buy flour that seemingly did not touch the water before and make it into matzah. However, many people are stricter that it should be watched, which means that you should have rabbinical supervision from the time it was cut. They actually send rabbis to the fields, and they watch the tractors, and they make sure it's a nice, beautiful, sunny day, and everything's dry. And they won't do it if it's raining. They wouldn't do it. They won't do it if it's a rainy day. Forget about it, because they're going to cut the kernels, and then it's going to get wet from the rain. So they'll pick a nice sunny day, have it all cut, pack it away into watertight bags or water sealed bags, and bring it to the mill, and they would stay with it to the mill until it gets ground into flours. Again, put it into water sealed bags, and then bring it somewhere else, etc., until it gets made into matzah. Right now, you could do this with machine matzah, or you can do this with handmade matzah. Right? There is, as a matter of fact, there is in Israel, they sell machine-made shmura matzah with the stamp of the Eidah Haredis, which is known as the strictest rabbinical organization. The Eidah Haredis in Yerushalayim, they give a stamp of approval of shmura matzah made by machine. However, many people, they don't eat that because they want to eat the handmade matzah for various reasons. The Rebbe was very particular about handmade matzah, and as I said, that's why I want to correct you. The handmade, the round versus the square is because machines, the way that machines work, it's much easier for them to do the square matzah, and the way that people work, it's much easier. Because you make a round ball and then you roll it out, etc. It's much better to make it round. For hands, for your hands, it's much easier to do it round. For machines, and that's why it happens to be that way. It happens to be that machine is usually square.
I heard there was like some kind of Kabbalistic reason for round over square, but
could be. It could be. I've never seen it yet, and if you want to show me a book that says so, I'm happy to see it. I've never seen clearly one or the other. As a matter of fact, I don't know why anybody would dream making square matzah before machine came around. Why would you do it? Like, why would a human being think of making a square matzah? It's extremely difficult. To take a piece of dough and make a perfect square out of it, very hard. Much easier to make it round. That's why pizzas are nice and round because you have people handling them. They swing it around. It's much easier to make it round and square.
You want to make a matzah bread house?
Huh?
You want to make a matzah bread house?
Matzah bread house?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
It's a Jewish version of the gingerbread house.
Jewish version of gingerbread. Can I know it? Yeah, what is that? Yeah.
Oh.
What's that?
Yeah.
Anyway, did I answer your question or did I answer part of your question?
Just the first part. The other two, because we had three different ones.
Yeah.
We got over the first in the square. And
Yeah.
the other one was.
No, your question, why is there so many machlokes? There's not a lot of machlokes. There are certain people that are more particular on one thing over the other, but they're not necessarily straight halacha. Right? Good. Very good. I have some interesting questions over here. He writes it in Hebrew. Matzah sheira. A matzah should definitely have a good, qualified kosher supervision on it, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong in making matzah, and therefore you should definitely, if you want to fulfill the mitzvah properly, you should buy matzah with a proper kosher certification. In Israel, it's very readily available. You can go to most supermarkets, comes close to Pesach. Most supermarkets in Israel, even in secular neighborhoods, a lot of people observe matzah. The machine ones are not that expensive. It's very cheap. The handmade ones are more expensive. Depends which handmade ones, but handmade ones could come out to maybe about cheapest would be like maybe 100 shekel, a little less than 100 shekel, a kilo. The thicker boxes, not the thin box, the thicker box, a kilo.
Like 9 of them?
Probably more like 15.
Oh, that's not that bad. Okay. In
Yeah.
America,
Well, that's not that bad. What does that mean? That you're paying like 8 shekel a matzah. You know, it's a lot of money.
Compared to America?
Yeah.
I paid $30 around.
Okay, so that's about the same. $30 is about 100 shekels. So that's about it for 2 pounds. For 2 pounds, not for 1 pound. Here we go by kilos. Kilos is like 2 pounds. Here it's usually a kilo. It's usually a kilo for about 100 shekel. Right? That's the handmade ones. The non-handmade ones you can buy. You can buy this box with maybe 5 kilo box for probably for the same 100 shekel. You buy 5 kilos, or maybe even less.
It's like $16 for 3.
For what?
Costco.
$16 for three what?
For 1 pound.
For 3 pounds.
1 pound.
For 1 pound of matzah?
Pretty sure.
And that's handmade or not handmade? Oh, handmade ones? Costco actually sells handmade matzah?
Yeah, oh yeah, sure. No, great.
Good. Very nice. Yeah, anyone else?
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Off topic.
Uh-oh.
It has to do with Gamara.
Oh, absolutely.
For a second. No. Do you remember that at the beginning of this Gamara, we actually learned this last year, this time? We were talking about how they had bread to tell everyone. They would put bread out.
Yeah.
To tell everyone when
The 2 loaves.
Yeah, the 2 loaves, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, you remember.
Wow, you've been here for a long time already.
Yeah. So about that, Rabbi, how
Yeah.
did they have those loaves, which we said are leaven?
Yeah.
leaven, if you can't own any matzah? We said they're
You can't
disqualified
own?
loaves. I thought you can't own any chametz.
Right.
So how were they able to have those?
Yeah,
They burn
well,
them.
again, they would put 2 loaves there in the morning. 1 loaf they would take away when you weren't allowed to eat anymore. Now, when there's 1 loaf, you can't eat, but you can still benefit
I
from
thought
it.
you can't own before you can.
No. On the contrary, no. How could you eat something you don't own?
You can't eat. Exactly, that's the point.
How could you eat something you don't own? Obviously,
I thought it was
the stop eating is first. No, the stop again. That's even after all the times. Machashir, right? The concept with chametz, the first time you have to stop eating, and then about an hour later
That's
you
the
can't
whole
own
day
it.
before you're saying.
It's the day before Pesach, yeah.
Oh, no, it's not Erev
So it's
Shabbos.
gonna be a
Huh?
full this year.
What?
It's not Erev Shabbos. It's like Erev Pesach. It's like a full day. Like 25.
Again, the night of the Seder, the whole day before, right? So
I don't
yeah.
have any questions.
Anyways, shkoyach.
Rabbi, this year is gonna be a problem.
What's going to be a problem?
Pesach is once a Shabbos.
Pesach is Matzah Shabbos? It is?
No.
Oh, I love these ones.
Crazy, huh?
I love this Shabbos
That
night,
means
man.
you can't eat comments, but you stop eating comments on Shabbat.
Oh.
Those are fun. Those are fun ones.
You know, like,
Ketzad anu poidim
how do you do that?
I always
im anu.
You still came. You shut them down.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not the same.
What are you complaining
Then
about?
you know that we burned the comments?
John Yazel is asking a question in Hebrew, but I don't quite understand what he's saying. Ketzad anu podim or yodim? Maybe he's asking. Is he asking how's the kapara? Maybe is he asking maybe forgiveness if you didn't eat matzah in the right time? I'm not sure what he's asking, but yeah. Thanks for your questions. Unfortunately, we have to go to learning Gemara on our own here in the yeshiva and not just over here in class. Kenai Nahara, we answered a lot of questions here, and Bezrat Hashem, we love you. See you again. Thanks for coming, and yeah. If you ask questions, maybe if you ask questions online, we'll do that. Do that again. Okay, good. Anything else? No, we don't have any questions.